Hey everyone, welcome back to the Epic Investor Podcast. I'm here with Rich and with James, and today we're going to talk about the power of the platform. If you feel like you're stuck or you feel like you're trapped, or you're just not able to break through some of those ceilings, or you feel the constant nagging of the to-do list, and you have constant bombardment throughout your day of those that are bringing their problems to you, today's episode will provide clarity and even some freedom if you'll let it. So with that, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm with Rich and with James, and today we are excited and thrilled to talk to you about the power of platforms and the way systems have a massive impact in one's business and even in one's life. The idea is simply this: when we buy businesses or when we consider buying businesses, we're not really looking at what it sells or the service it offers, but rather we're looking at the platform or the systems that business uses. So with that, let's get started. So I've seen several experiences. I've been involved in several different experiences and seen many different businesses and people that operate at a very high level. It's extremely commendable, but it seems that it's all just internal. For example, I met a gentleman in Oregon who ran a $5 million business in the grocery world, but his hand was literally touching every single thing. He was involved in purchasing. He was involved in paying the bills. He was involved in vendor relationships. He was hiring. He was firing. And the thing I noticed there was the culture in that company was, we can't do anything without the owner. We got to ask him. He's got to do it. He's got to be the one that signs off on this. Well, he had 4 locations. And can you imagine trying to run anything in a large footprint where you have to be the one that's constantly doing it? Have you ever felt an experience or been a part of something like that before?
That's hard. I don't know if I've ever been a part of something like that. I have felt that, at times when you try to control everything, and if you think that you have to do everything, I think that's a huge red flag that you do not have the right processes in place to begin with.
I would just say also, that's not a business, right? That's more of a bottleneck. If it's all tied to just the one person, if that person burns out or something happens, your entire business then is falling through, right?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. My outline here shows that it's not a business, it's a ticking time bomb. Because to your exact point, everybody's nightmare at the leadership level is, what happens if that person doesn't come to work tomorrow for whatever reason? Does it all implode? Does it all fall apart? Especially if it's on you. So we actually bought this business from this gentleman, if you can believe it. When we go in and ask questions like, what's your margin? How much running capital do you keep available? And he just goes, I look at the bank account, and if I got 400 grand there, we're doing great. And he buys deals all day long, and he's slinging stuff left and right. And we looked at this and really considered, is this something we really want to get into? Because we liked the business. The grocery business is a fairly stable business. This one was a little unique. It was discount grocery. But we had to look seriously at how we were going to fix that problem, and quickly. Because how do you come into a situation like that where you are not an expert in that industry and you have to replace that owner? And think about that for a minute. How do you create a platform in a situation that you're not familiar with and you have to replace the person that runs through everything? So we ended up buying it, but I'm gonna share with you the power of the platform here. We empowered each of the managers at each of these locations, and we gave them a calculator or a tool, simply an Excel spreadsheet, some genius concept that came up at 1 a.m. when we can't sleep, right? And each of these managers then had the ability to make a decision without the sign off or approval of, or the phone call to the owner. They could use this financially sound, data-driven platform where they could go in and buy what they needed for their store. And it took a tremendous load off. Now, we suffered that, we had to go in and replace the owner for like 6 months, and we suffered that for a while until the managers were trained that they don't have to call me to take a break. They don't have to call me to buy produce. They don't have to call me to hire or fire. Follow the model, follow the system. And so that is a very quick, simple example of the power of the platform. And I think that most of us in business and in life, we want to feel important and we want to be busy, but we often complain about being too busy. The phone never stops. The emails never stop flowing. the vendors need something, the employees always need something. And while that brings us some level of gratification, it should be an indication that there is a problem. It should scream in your face that you have a lack of systems or a lack of process. So
it seems like the owner he was building a job. He wasn't building a business.
You know, and I asked him before we bought it, I asked him, so what do you enjoy doing outside of work? And there was nothing, because that was what he filled his day with. And he wasn't unhappy. He wasn't like disgruntled, but he also realized that there was a lot of life that he was missing because he wasn't taking trips with his wife. You know, they after they sold the company, they started traveling to like Sturgis. They jump on motorcycles and go to Sturgis, and that was so cool to see, like the evolution of going from what I call the ball and chain of work to doing what you really love, having that freedom to just go and be. And actually, we retained him, by the way. He was an employee for us, but we only used him when we needed help, like buying something or if a vendor went sideways. And so it gave him all this freedom. And that, I think, is what everybody craves, is they want the ability to lead. Which brings me to my next point, that when there are platforms, leadership is present. When there aren't any platforms, I think we call it leadership because we're the one doing everything, right?
Have you heard of the book, The E-Myth?
Oh yeah, it's a great book.
That just comes to mind, just thinking about, him as the technician or manager doing everything on his own and not really focusing on how he can leverage those strengths and build a true business.
Yeah, I really like the E-Myth because it can help people understand that they might really be good at something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they should own the business in that arena or in that area. But I do really love the concepts in E-Myth. But part of the leadership component is, and I'll ask you this question, how are you able to lead with vision and lead with a deep level of purpose if you don't have some kind of system or platform to lead with?
Well, I don't know if you can, or at least not long term. Well, let me put it this way: you can if you're all alone. Right? But business is about bringing the resources together, bringing people and pushing on the same side of the car to get it unstuck. Right? It's not everyone find a corner and push and see what happens. There's early on in my career, I had these visions and of what I wanted to accomplish, and I thought I had a purpose. But I struggled with getting the right platform in place and I went through a lot of different, businesses and things like that until, we found the EOS, and that was a huge, huge thing for us. How do you gain traction and actually get somewhere towards the vision that you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, I was going to say EOS has been so impactful for us, right? I mean, just the structure, the scorecards, the segues, the rocks, having that structure is so important. Without it, I think it's so easy to get distracted. Even with it, and we've seen ourselves do this, right? There have been some instances where we are using EOS, but even with EOS in place, it's kind of easy to get distracted once in a while. So imagine trying to run a business and be successful without those systems in place. It really is everything. Otherwise, it's just too easy to go off the rails.
I have done the years of trying to figure out systems, or I'll pick one thing this week and say we're going to create a system for that one thing, and I'll spend hours, middle of the night hours, right? Because you still have to work during the day and you still have demands. And you come up with what you think is a good system, and yet it typically doesn't have buy-in, it doesn't have the right protocols, it doesn't have the right processes in place, and you've unfortunately, you've wasted so much time getting to a point where you were hoping to get relief and it doesn't come, and now you're twice as frustrated, and all of the problems are compounding. And so, great segue, by the way, Rich, into the third point of the utilization of an existing platform that can be tailor-made to your existing situation, and that's EOS. And I've personally benefited from trying to create systems using KPIs and data-driven equations, and then moving into EOS where it's like I beat my head against the wall for years, and here it is, like, log in and follow the system, right? And EOS has been a great platform, and I know we're not sponsored by EOS, and we're not selling the platform, but I think just how are we going to talk about business, and how are we going to talk about leadership without referring to EOS?
Well, that's just because we are using it and we love it. I think the real point is you've got to have an operating system your business runs on. Like the example you were talking about just earlier, what came to my mind is, these executives will go out, or an investor will even try something on his own and it doesn't work. And so then they try something else. And then there's like a new flavor of the quarter or a new theme of the month. And you just end up spinning your wheels. And so I think the impact that a platform or, a system will have is that it gets everyone speaking the same language. It gets everyone focused on the same vision, getting the right people in the right seats. It makes the use of data on a regular basis and more actionable. And then you take everything you want to accomplish in a year, squeeze it into 3 months, and that's your focus for those 3 months. That's your year, essentially. And I've seen companies accomplish 2 to 3 times what other companies typically accomplish in a year because they do it that way.
And I'd love to just piggyback on that, Rich. I feel for the leadership teams that, and I'm not singling anybody out, and I've been in this position before, where you're kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping that you've made the right decision. You're hoping that I've analyzed the right data and I'm focusing on the one right thing, and we're just going to try this. And you rally the troops, and everybody's like, "Hoorah, let's go!" And it doesn't work. You're allowed to miss. You're allowed to fail. By all means, you should. But if you do that over and over and over and over again, you burn out your leadership team, and you no longer have the confidence that you're going to take us to the promised land. And so EOS has provided some of that stability and more importantly, the ability to measure that you are headed in the right direction and doing the right things. I do really love, though, when in the concept of platforms, the whole purpose of that platform is to create a repeatable, scalable, teachable process that can be done over and over again. And Rich, you mentioned growth. It probably came easier, and it probably, you mentioned how it came faster, right? And it probably didn't require as much energy or effort when it was approached with a platform mentality. What's the system? What's the process? Can we repeat this? Do we have the right buy-in?
And I think I've even heard you say this. Running a business with the system is easy. Trying to run a business with parts of one is extremely difficult. And I don't want to say that running a business is easy in the sense that if you do have a system, everything else, all your challenges go away. No, I think the capacity to deal with them is improved greatly, and that's what makes it so much better. There's a significant opportunity, I think, if you find a business that you're wanting to acquire and it doesn't have the right processes and systems, but it's still producing cash. That's a significant opportunity I think people overlook a lot of times. And then they see something that's maybe not quite right or performing like it could, and then they're critical and then they don't want to buy it. But I think those are the real gems, because you can add a system to the business and completely change the trajectory.
Well, and I would say, isn't that where the opportunity would be then in that acquisition? Is
partly, absolutely.
The absence of that platform, especially if you've already created one that works in a similar or exact industry, and you can just buy it, plug and play. And now you're creating, 2x is easier than 10x comes to mind, right? You're creating this inertia that just flows. And frankly, you're creating a whole bunch of excitement and energy around it.
Whenever I think of a business, I think there's really 4 things, product, brand, distribution, and operations. You have, what it is that you're doing, what's the brand you're building, how are you distributing it to the world, right? And then what's your operations like? And I think a system like EOS or another platform helps put all of those pieces together in a way that you can drive value, not for all stakeholders.
Or in the concept of the platform and the repeatable process. I remember a time where we bought a business and we were trying to figure out how a different company in California, and we were trying to figure out how to scale the company. And, we were following the existing model, if you will. We go back to our customers, what are you looking for? What can we provide for you? It was a plumbing supply company. And so you had these these line cards where they would say, yeah, we want brass fittings, or we want hoses, or we want sprinklers. And the good sales rep turns around and goes to work and finds the right one and he sells them. But eventually we had like 1,700 SKUs that we sold. But you weren't scaling. You kept hitting this glass ceiling of all of our customers. They have everything that we have to offer. And so what we did was we broke the whole thing down to a basic level. What business are we in? And I'm not claiming we got it right, but I am claiming that the process that we went through to identify this actually helped scale. So in this case, we got it right. But we identified that we were simply an import-export company that happened to sell plumbing supply lines, plumbing products. Now, if we're an import-export company, what does that mean? And what verticals open up when you become an import-export company and not just a plumbing supply company? Well, we traveled to Asia several times a year to go tour factories to look at other product lines. And if we sell to the plumbing supply world, well, what other products are they buying elsewhere that we could provide to them? You know, a known, trusted customer with great history. And we found one thing that actually took off. And it was two things that took off. It was basket strainers that go in that bottom of your kitchen sink. And water heater pans, those little aluminum pans that sit under your water heater so that there's a little bit of a leak, it can catch it without causing a problem. And they're very cheap, they're very light. We are already an import-export company, so we could put it on the container, right? Fill the container, we're paying for it anyway. And one simple little product that made, a couple $100,000, you just created a process, you just created a platform, a system that can be repeatable. Great. Now let's go look at garden hoses. Now let's go look at hoverboards. Now let's go look at those. Do you remember those big battle balls that you can fill up and you can get inside and run around? We brought them in. So sometimes when you go into a business, right, that has this existing culture of, we only do plumbing supply lines, but you're an import-export company. What can't you do? So the power of the platform can magnify, especially when you get buy-in from everybody.
It's almost like a reframing an identity of who the business is, and then that defines everything else after that, like their purpose.
Well, I completely agree. And if you've ever seen, or if you've ever read the story of McDonald's, or you've seen the movie The Founder, you remember that Ray Kroc, he turned the corner when a consultant came in and said, "You're not in the burger business, you're in the real estate business." And that catapulted. I'm you know how big McDonald's is, so yeah, I could speak to to the end of the day about platforms and the power, and my heart goes out to people that are grinding and struggling and just working hard, and I just would tip my hat and say there's a better way.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So let's say a business owner was wanting to sell, or an investor has just bought a business and they're trying to get through this, right? And a lot of times what I hear people say is, I don't have the resources to put a system in place, or I don't have the time to put a system in place. I'm so busy running the business, I don't have time to work on the business. What would you say to that?
Well, I've had the privilege of, it is a privilege after the fact, but I've had the scary situation of sitting in front of myself in the mirror and in front of other business owners and having this tough conversation. And the fact is this: what's it worth to you? What's your personal time worth to you? And if you are not happy with how things are going and you don't claim to have the resources or the time to do this, you're never going to. So if you want something to change, then we're going to have to make a dramatic change now. Personally, it's got to start with you. And if that means that you can afford to take a hit on your income while you put these resources in place so that you can quickly rebound and get your income back, then we got to do it. If it means that we need to turn the air conditioning up from 68 degrees to 74 degrees so that your electric bill goes down, do it. If it means that you are not buying bottled water, if it means that you're raising your prices so that you can have a better margin, there are lots of ways. When you look at a P&L and when you look at numbers, there's lots of ways to put some money to the bottom line, very simple ways. I guarantee you there's 20% of fees out there that you're just paying because you think that's the way to do it. So I would simply say, Rich, that there's ways to put the money to the bottom line, and it's absolutely worth it. You will ask yourself, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I just bite the bullet and do this sooner? Because your freedom is priceless. You can't put a price tag on that.
I've heard that so many times. Business owners that said, I don't know why I didn't do this sooner.
Well, plus also, if someone is saying that they don't have the time to do it, it's funny, right? Because implementing that system is the very thing that actually might make them more efficient and give them the time to actually focus on what matters most. So it's kind of, for me, it's the first thing that comes to mind is if you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen, right? But also, just ironically, if you don't have time, getting those structures in place and those processes in place is the very thing that actually will ultimately end up freeing up your time down the line if you do it the right way.
One of the things that caught my attention, this is almost on a personal note, if you will, if you don't mind me sharing, but I had an executive once, he was speaking on the topic of, how you're running your business. And then he asked, how are you running your home? A lot of times as, busy executives or even investors where you're just focused on all the things that you're doing, how much time is actually spent working on a family vision of what your family wants to do? And how much are you spending on how much, what kind of meetings are you having with your family? Are you going on those dates with your spouse? Are you spending time with each of the kids? In our family, we implemented EOS as a family. And so we have our vision, everyone went through, we have our core values. Every quarter we have what we call a PO3. It's called Party of Three. So my wife and I and one of our kids, we take them out to lunch or dinner, and the whole focus is on them. We want to understand what their rocks or their goals are and how we can support them. And it's been an amazing experience to bring that home. And that was really, when you think about it, how can you be successful in business and go home and not have a successful home? Because that will affect business.
I really love it when business owners open up a little bit about their home life, and because I think everybody kind of just assumes that, it must be so easy, or it's all perfect, right? And yet it is so funny to me. I'll come home and I'll talk to my wife. She'll say, I just had such a rough day. They weren't listening. I had all these objectives today and they just couldn't stay on task. And I was like, it sounds like the office. Like, sounds like work, right? Like, had all these expectations and my day blew up, or whatever the case is. Or my wife will say things like, we just need to train them better to do this. I'm like, the alignment is just incredible. But it to your point, it can't be approached from a business standpoint of, performance interviews and whatnot. But I do appreciate you sharing that, because there is as much alignment as there is between work and life. The impact is it's ingrained. They're inseparably connected. What affects you at work affects you at home, and vice versa.
Well, early on in my career, I was actually studying to be a cardiovascular surgeon. I don't know if you guys do that, but I went in. I was able to be part of some open heart surgeries, and just got to speak with several different surgeons. And I remember this one, extremely successful. He was out of the Salt Lake market, and he made a comment. And he goes, "Yeah, I make a lot of money. I've helped a lot of people save their lives." And he says, "My family, they spend all the money for me. I never do anything with my family." And it was completely separate. So he was extremely successful as a surgeon, but didn't even know his kids. And the family. And it was just one of those sacrifices that he made. And that was one of the reasons I actually chose not to go down that road. I wanted to make sure that whatever path I chose, it included family. And that would have been very difficult for me to do.
Well, Rich, that kind of reminds me of something you mentioned a few weeks back. You said something along the lines of no success outside of the home can compensate for failure in the home. And that just drives that point home. It's so important to focus on those things. And I think full circle, that begins with establishing the right processes and platforms at work, also in the home though as well. Otherwise, you're bound to kind of be set up for failure.
Thanks, James. I appreciate you rounding that together. And frankly, I'll call back on something Rich said is it isn't the absence of problems, right? You know, when you're doing that at home and at work, you now have the capacity to handle the problems or the turbulence that will hit you. That just inevitable. It's going to happen. So
I just want to say two things on closing on that. One, on the personal side, it's amazing to see when your kids and their spouses grab onto this idea of who they want to become as a family, and they get excited about going down and actually defining what their purpose is. And then everything else starts falling into place. It's the same thing. And James, I'm going to share, you as an example. When James joined the team, there was this idea of what, an investor success manager did. And the evolution that James has gone through over the last year of focusing on purpose and what's most important, and what we're trying, what kind of impact we're really focused on our clients. There's just been a huge change in not only the attitude, but the focus that James has had. It's been really fun to watch, but that excitement that comes out because of it. So I just can't agree with you more, Jason, about how important it is when you're looking at businesses that there's these systems in place, because without them, it really is like trying to guide a ship without a rudder.
Amen. I think that in closing, I'd probably just say this. If you're looking at buying a business, you're looking at growing a business, you're looking at the department that you're in charge of, you're looking at the role that you're over, you're at home trying to be better, look at the systems, because anything with a system or a platform can carry the purpose or carry the profits, or it can even carry people further than any one product or any one solution can. And so if you're out there grinding like everybody else, and I guess I should say everyone's out there grinding like everyone else, I would challenge you to ask the question 15 times a day. Well, what's the system to that? What's our process? That is the platform that you're either missing or creating. What's the process? And do yourself a favor and write it down, or have your assistant write it down, or have the department head create the playbook with those systems. And they should be evergreen. They should continually be updated, because you're going to run into something new next week that you hadn't run into before. Well, how do we update the process, right? The leader should be asking all the time, what's our system? What's our process? Or have we updated the process? Have we updated the system? Is it in writing? I'd like to see it. So that in closing, I just, again, believe in the power of platforms, believe that it creates a ton of freedom, not just for the leader, but also for the leader's team, and the people beneath have the ability then to lead with vision at every level. If you're building a business or scaling a company, or you start thinking like a business investor or a platform investor, look for systems, build them where they're missing, create them where they're lacking, find the gaps. And if you want to learn how we do this across our platform, subscribe to our podcast or check us out at epiccapitalfunds.com. We also invite you to share this episode with anyone that you might be associated or networked with that would benefit from understanding and learning more about the power platforms. We'd love to hear your story. We'd love to learn from you about the platforms that you've created. So that's all we have for today. Thanks.